Hello and welcome to Operations Utopia. My name is Matt Neal, and today I'm going to be speaking with Crystal Allard. She's the Senior Director of Government Strategy for Viva Systems. Now, she spent the majority of her career at the FDA working in various innovation and technology roles. And whenever we get together at a conference or meeting, we usually get into these super deep discussions about how to bring together collaborative efforts and modernize data and submissions in the industry. And with her experience and background and passion for this topic, I couldn't think of a better guest to have on the podcast than Crystal. So please enjoy my chat with Crystal Allard. So one thing that's been on my mind and I wanted to talk to you about was around some of the energy over the course of the last, I would say, 2 years or so, more than in a long time, around a different approach in life sciences and the health authorities embracing technology in a way that I haven't seen that kind of energy before. So I wonder what your perspective is on that, kind of seeing activity that's interesting for the first time in a couple of years. It was kind of stasis from my perspective. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I've seen a lot more energy around technology and using technology to reduce timelines. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like super coupled with data, right? And I have seen in the last year, especially, that we're starting to rethink some of the assumptions that we previously made around data and the technology that we use to do analysis, right? So, I mean, things like CDISC standards, for instance, these standards have been in place for my entire career, essentially.
Right.
Very long time. But they have a new CEO who was a skeptic, who himself wants to make change. And I think part of what I'm seeing is there's these like external forces outside of health authorities that are starting to move health authorities toward believing that there's this inevitability of new technology that they need to get on board with. And it seems more inevitable to me than it did previously. Things like updating standards that we've used for a really long time, things like rethinking the way that we receive submissions, platforms. I hear them saying APIs.
Yeah.
This year. That's new. EMA is writing it down. FDA is saying it out loud.
Interesting. So what are the outside forces? What do you mean?
I think standards organizations are starting slowly to rethink the way that they work. Again, new head of CDISC, new head of HL7 Vulcan, and then AI, right? The event of AI has opened up this world of possibility that we want to harness and maybe don't always have the data that we need to do it or the technology that we need to do it. I think the other one, too, is COVID, right? We learned during COVID that you can do a rolling review, that you can do review a lot faster. We proved the point, and now going back to doing things the old way seems a little bit not the right path, right? But what we also learned is like during that rolling review, it was hard. It was really hard because the data wasn't in the format that they needed it. So they learned like, maybe the downstream data doesn't necessarily need to be in perfectly standardized format in order for it to be usable, because standardization doesn't always equate to use and usability or even validity. But it does still need to be accessible and usable and analyzable, and getting data to health authorities faster in ways that are repeatable is something that they couldn't do during COVID, but they proved they could do it the hard way.
Yeah.
I want to keep doing it, but maybe make it the easy button.
Interesting. Yeah. So in what way did you see this energy manifesting in the short term versus, well, I guess really what I'm getting at is like, because there's this energy around it, because there's these changes, do you think there will also be acceleration of adoption and change? Because our time frames are typically very long on those items, right?
They are very long. I still get frustrated when I look at like the HL7 development timeline, and how incredibly long that is. But or not the HL7, sorry, I meant ICH, the ICH development timeline. HL7 was a lot faster. But what I've been seeing at HL7, participating in some of their working groups, is that they're using AI to develop standards, right? And they're using AI to develop models, and they're using AI to develop APIs, right? So, and style sheets and implementation guides. So
Huh.
they're really shortening the development timeline of the standard itself. Which,
Interesting.
yeah, and what's the holdup then becomes the structure around the way that they test these things and that they implement and the way that they even like adopt, right? The way the HL7 votes and adopts and does the hackathons and the testing and that kind of stuff.
Right.
That infrastructure is still geared toward the development timeline from 3 years ago,
Right.
but they've shortened it massively
Hmm.
using AI, and with like many fewer resources as well. And I know that FDA and EMA and other health authorities, they participate in these standards development organizations, and they see the shortening of these timelines, and they know that they can get better standards and better data faster.
Huh.
So they're seeing that, and they're trying to figure out how to apply it to what they're doing as well.
And do you think that's really just because those groups are using, like, call it base level LLM consolidation of materials to create those drafts faster?
Yeah, that's
Wow.
they're demonstrating how you can shorten a timeline in order to get to an outcome, and the outcome is a better data standard for better data exchange. Like in some cases, one of the HL7 groups is for an API. It's not even for a data standard. It's for an API standard for exchanging data. But they're able to do more faster, which means they can create all this like wraparound stuff with the data standard faster, which means they can prove they can get it to FDA faster as well.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I kind of forget that they can use them too, right? Um, yeah, I think so. So the natural acceleration that's coming to us from AI just helping us do even the base level materials should be accelerating the thought process. Maybe you just get the ideas out of people's heads and on paper faster, and seeing drafts and things like that get people thinking faster. I mean, I guess that's good. Also, probably, retirements and people that are just moving out and younger ideas coming in, people that are native digital, that are like, what are we doing at this job with
Yeah.
paper? Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and those people at working at health authorities, they have, some they have Copilot, they have Gemini, they have like they each have their own version of their internal
Yeah.
behind the firewall AI tooling, and the younger people, the newer reviewers, they're using those, they're adopting those tools very quickly. We're also hearing not as much from EMA, but we do hear that the FDA commissioner wants reviews to happen faster, and that he wants AI to be an enabler for review to happen faster, right? And so even though that may not be a deeply informed understanding of what AI can do, it is a possibility that is opening a door for better technology use at FDA, which is really necessary, which sort of opens up the possibility of like, if we can in fact shoot for a much shorter time frame for a review process, what technology is needed to do that, and they can backfill that and bring in the tech experts they need.
Do you think it's globally the conversation is shifting, or is it's still the big three kind of groups looking at it? Like, are they learning from each other too?
I think they are learning from each other. Like we just saw the joint guidance that FDA and EMA put out on AI, guiding principles or whatever they called that.
Yeah.
So that's the first time I've seen that happen. At DIA EU last week, they had multiple health authorities in the room talking about reliance, and they were talking about sort of the inevitability of a shared submission process.
Interesting.
They weren't really talking about technology, and they were very cagey about answering technology questions, but we know that technology is the enabler for this.
Yeah, yeah.
So they can't get away from it. We know they're going back to work and understanding that technology is how this happens.
And do you think that's stemming from like not wanting to endorse any particular thing, or just keeping it neutral? Like what?
I think it's a little bit of both. They don't want to endorse any particular tooling or vendor, even though we know that they use tools, and I personally don't see that as an endorsement. I see that as truth, but
Right.
here we are. Um, but I also think it's because they're in the like planning and prepping stage, right? Like they talked a lot about shared submission platforms, but they absolutely would not commit to what that was. They talk a lot about APIs. Maybe they don't need to have a single shared submission platform. Maybe they can connect them through APIs. So I do think they're seeing it. I also think the people in the room are the ones who are working at the standards organizations, and I think it's the standards organizations who are also driving global convergence. We're seeing ICH standards come out and be published by multiple countries and not just the large ones, all in the same format, right? They're all publishing like the M4Q R2 for comments in the same format as ICH is. So
Interesting.
the standards organizations themselves are driving it a little bit, and it's the responsibility of the health authorities to understand what technology they need to implement to take advantage of what's coming for them.
If that's happening, where do you see maybe a missed opportunity for global harmonization? Like, it's one thing to coordinate and kind of do similar things with them, but do you get the sense that they recognize that some of it is actually better to be globalized?
Yeah, there are a couple of places where either we have a missed opportunity or we may never get there. We might just have to understand what we can and cannot influence and change.
Yeah.
Security, right? I mean, I don't see great reasons for everyone to have their own set of security rules and to require information to be securely different.
Right. Yeah.
But I really do wish that health authorities would work with each other on their security requirements, data security requirements. There are other places. Standards development is sort of a bright spot, but do we really need to have a different M1 for every country?
Right.
I also, this about me, but I see ECTD 4.0 as both a globalization attempt and a miss at and a missed opportunity at better technology that would better exchange information.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if it'll leapfrog now. If this is all, you know what I mean? Like just skip it, because we know those timelines were pretty far out for the bigger organizations. Do you think they're waiting and watching Japan's experience and they may skip it? I mean, that would be interesting. I know there's been a lot of sunk cost, but
there is a lot of sunk cost there. I think there will be opportunities to skip it. The question is who's building the next thing, right? Who's building the thing that we're going to leapfrog to? And is it ICH? And is ICH got the tech chops to build ECTD 5? I don't know the answer.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about API and direct connects, because then you would think like, almost like gateways or whatever. You would have individual gateway connections to each health authority potentially, with real-time exchange, potentially gated real-time exchange, where you're basically doing rolling always then, right?
Yeah.
In that sense, it would be like
dream, right? That FDA is talking about. It leads to like a couple of questions, right? Like the one is, in what format are they really willing to accept that information downstream?
Yeah.
Or do we need to rethink the exchange paradigm? So now we have this like over the fence process where you create your package and you toss it over the fence. What if we just rethink the fence? And maybe instead of thinking of this middle space as just information moving back and forth, it's actually a storage place or a viewing space.
Yeah. I was wondering the other day, I wonder what your take with this on this would be is when we talk about shared spaces, for example, do you think there is a partial security vulnerability concern that keeps these things from being unified? So if you have one place, that makes the target pretty straightforward, and the potential infiltration a larger issue when and if it happens? Or is this kind of stuff maybe, I don't know, is it a strategic IP as is governed now, making a difference when you talk about the exchange of information at the health authority review level? Is any of this stuff the type of IP you worry about losing at that point, where it would get, I don't know. I know that pharma companies are inundated with attempts to break in. I've sat in on those teams, the InfoSec teams, and it's constant bombardment, right? So there's certainly something there. It's happening. But, at some point, it's either that centralization either becomes a big vulnerable weakness, or potentially a impenetrable fortress with more people trying to protect it. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you. It's funny because, so does FDA, right? And I'm sure EMA as well. Health authorities are also bombarded every day, and there's this catch-22 thing that happens. FDA says we can't share information. For instance, I just heard them say they can't share their review memos with other health authorities because of the IP concerns and the security concerns with sharing a sponsor's IP with another health authority. But at the same time, they're also saying that they would like to get better access to a sponsor's information at an earlier stage. And it's the same information.
Right.
In both places.
Yeah.
Right? And it might take legislation. we've had to do this before in order to get entities to share information. Meaningful use for clinical trials comes to mind, but information and financial information, et cetera. So it could potentially create an additional force, but both of these organizations are dealing with this security problem already.
Yeah.
All the time, right? So they're clearly equipped.
There's a ton of duplication of effort is kind of my point.
Yes.
And all of it imperfect because the methodology changes all the time. So it's kind of interesting, right? I just don't think in the criminal mindset, I guess. So I'm just like, well, what are you going to do with that information anyway? Like, where are you going to market?
How are you going to manufacture?
How are you going to,
product in your basement?
Right. If you were in I don't know, this is just crazy speculation, but if you were in the market to try to create a product that you were going to sell, you're probably not going to use the real ingredients anyway. Right? You might figure out how to stamp it and make it look the same. So I could see maybe some manufacturing details around the color and stuff might be, I don't know. That's a total tangent, but I know security is a concern that comes up around these platforms all the time.
Yeah. I see two legit concerns too around the security. The one is there is a real IP problem, right? The data in the US, we say the data is owned by the sponsors, not by the FDA, and that they're only stewarding it, right? So, whose responsibility is it to share access to that data? Is it the FDA's or is it the sponsors? And in some cases, I think what we're learning through some of our shared submission platform pilots that are happening now is that if the information is owned by a sponsor, they can do what they want with it. They can put it wherever they want. They can give it to FDA, but they can put it and make it viewable in other places themselves without FDA's permission. Once FDA sends them a letter, the sponsor owns the letter. They can put that out where they want. So they can do a little bit more, I think, than they realize. And then the other piece, for health authorities is what are you viewing versus what are you creating yourself?
Right.
There is data and IP that FDA generates that they probably can't legally share, but that wouldn't prevent them from viewing someone else's data in a space that is sponsored by a consortia or a
Right.
not-for-profit or
Right.
whatever. If it's just
Yeah.
a view and it's not theirs.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, there's a lot of points to consider there. I think it's not an easy task for sure. Which is, part of the reason I called the podcast Operations Utopia is like, well, you got to think about the big picture at least a little bit. Obviously, the details start to eat away at what you can possibly do, and security is a big one. But it's almost like with this process, the security changes along the life cycle, which makes it weird. Like at some point, it becomes completely public.
Yeah.
Like the clinical trial, like it has to be the safety information has to. So it's this weird time boxed period of time that is really complicated to navigate when we talk about these shared spaces. But then everybody ruins it because they email stuff around all the time. So,
and the reality would be that we're just sending stuff through email anyway, or a hard drive that someone is driving or is putting through the mail.
It's so I don't know. It's an interesting one. So let's switch gears a little bit because I want to talk to you about a conversation we had a few months back where we were talking about RIM. In particular, regulatory information management, under the auspices of validation. But I think that it was a really interesting thing when you talked about how the health authorities were kind of unaware of RIM as a system or a thing that they needed to worry about. So could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of people at health authorities who haven't worked in industry, so they haven't put together a submission package. So they have this sort of imaginary idea of how that happens, but it's a very superficial idea, right? They're just like, then they put together this package and they think sort of in the terms of what they can see, which is a whole set of documents in an ECTD format, and they don't think about the data management piece and the data gathering and the levels of QC that go into that, and the levels of like standards validation and computer systems validation and all of the work that goes into that. They don't have a great understanding of how that happens. For instance, my favorite example here, and this is like my learning experience, I will take responsibility for putting the ETTD structure out into the universe. I was there when that happened. I worked at the Center for Tobacco Products when that got published. And at the time, we were thinking that if we created a separate structure for tobacco, that it would be easier for sponsors to put that structure together, and that if we just used a PDF backbone instead of an XML index file, that it would be easier. Not realizing, and I worked in reg ops before I went to FDA, so I have no excuses. I just wasn't. I just had been at FDA too long, I think.
Yeah.
In retrospect, and I've tried to share this more publicly, all of the tooling now is so focused on ECTD and is so good at writing code, go figure, that it's easier to create the ECTD format than it is to create things like eStar and these eSubmitter formats and this like weird ECTD structure. It takes more effort and time and money to create these special sources that we thought were easier.
Right.
And so I think that's fairly typical, and it's a really great reason that really that like process for putting out an RFI and request for information and having real conversations with industry, between industry and regulators, is so important.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's happening sort of again as these health authorities come up with new portals that they build.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is extra. You have, like, why not just put it in this section of the ECTD and you could have it? And they want to have special cuts of the information in their own little portal. I recently got back from a trip to China, and you kind of understand that there's all kinds of other things happening that aren't accounted for. There's no system that does it for you. And it's just this like shadow work that's happening in ops groups to get it done. And, you know, from a global perspective, you're like, okay, well, isn't everybody on ECTD now? Now we're done. Now we can just actually operationalize this and move forward. And it's like, yes, but. So it's almost like these add-ons beyond M1.
Yeah.
You know, like special signature stamps, or, you know, another proof that it was signed correctly, or digital signature acceptance here or there on documents that you're like, this proves nothing.
Certified translations.
Yeah.
Numbers counting up and numbers counting down.
Yeah, just administrivia that makes it so difficult to actually harmonize and get the speed that we're looking for is crazy to me sometimes when you really zoom out on it. But I don't know how we move people through it. And I think the fact that health authorities weren't as conscious about the back end of what's happening in a RIM system, coupled with when inspectors come on site, you're expected to have that stuff at the ready. You can't do it without a good RIM system, really.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting to me that there's all these validation standards that you're supposed to do, and they're like, oh, I didn't even know there was a system there. I didn't know to look for that one. Does talking about it create more scrutiny, and now they do start looking at it? I think what it is their expectations of your ability to produce something immediately. That shift is huge.
Yeah.
So if they realize that could be even more enhanced if they didn't hold RIM systems to the same standards as manufacturing systems and could put out just a statement about that somewhere, that would be such an accelerator to industry, right? Like,
for sure. And imagine
CSA helps, but it's still
right. But imagine we're putting information in a shared space, and we can see the same thing with a health authority. So it's more about updating what their like active view of information is, and how that changes what is necessary to be looked at during an inspection.
Right.
Because right now the review process and the inspection process are like
separate,
very separate, and the people who do that information, like deal with that information, are in completely different places, different systems, right? And they don't necessarily make sure that the data on both sides of those things is the same place. So imagine it's all in one place and we can all see it there, and you've had the clinical data, you know, for years before you're submitting a new drug application, and the inspectors were able to see that information in that place, which is the same place that a reviewer is going to go look at that information, in the way that sort of changes the paradigm. You're doing it once, and this like need for validation and checking just is completely different.
I hadn't really thought about that they, you know, that the inspector isn't holding the ECTD in their document room either. They're looking at it from underneath, like under the hood. Like they don't even necessarily need to know. Well, that'd be interesting. How would that change inspections?
Like, what do they need to know now? What do they need? Is there a system verification process that can exist at all times so that they don't need to check it at any point in time? Because it's been checked previously, and the system is just sort of saying, like, yeah, we checked. This is in the right format. This is in the right place. This process has been done. And it's all, we moved that information into the reviewer's viewing space.
Well, and I guess what doesn't sit in a submission necessarily is going to be things like, you know, commitment follow-up and things like that occur outside. There's results in submissions from those things, but like the actual traceability of the commitment, it's very interesting. But you'd think they would want that tool in their belt, you know, to have at their disposal.
if FDA, they talk about live review, right? If they want to move toward this live review process, what they're doing is they're looking at data downstream. And
Right.
the best way for them to do that is not just for them to look in the sponsor systems, but for there to be like a staging area where we can say, like, this data is ready for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be it. Like I said, this is the first time in a long time there's been this much energy around. We got to do something. We got to, like, we should be leveraging this technology at this point. So that's good, I guess. I wonder if the current pace of modernization will hit here. You know, I mean, it seems like every 2 weeks AI has exponentially changed in what it can do, which is so wild to see happening. It's going to hit us in some way. We're insulated a little bit because of all of the legislation required to make changes, but I think it seems to be catching up now, where it's inevitable. So,
Yeah.
what has been your biggest surprise, and maybe your biggest learning coming out from government to software?
I mean, I think the biggest surprise is, I don't know, let's see. The pace of work when you come outside of the government is so much faster. That it becomes this conversation about, it's inevitable that we can move faster outside of the government than the government can. So what can we do to move them as well? Like, what can we give them to help them to move faster? So that's been a thing that I think about a lot. Like, how do we enable the government to move faster? Because when you're in there and you're sort of suffering, right? Like, the suffering isn't that you don't have access to technology. The suffering is that it takes you a year to write a single SOW and another year to get it awarded. So you're literally out, like, you're behind by the time you get to the part where you're developing things. So what can we in industry provide? I think some of the things I've learned too is like how much more control we have outside in industry than we think we do. There is more that we can do that would drive health authorities to using the technology we want them to use. If we just think creatively about how we might help them get to that place, right? But they are willing and open, so that's one of the things. I mean, I think the other thing that always surprises me too, and again, this is like, I have a full circle moment because I was in Reg Ops a million years ago, but coming back to it, we're still doing so many of the same things that I was doing when I was 25.
Yeah.
I worked in Reg Ops.
It's frustrating, isn't it?
Why are people still building these boxes that, like, reviewers don't even click because they don't trust them, because they get them lost? You know, I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, I think, that surprises me, that we're still in this place, right? Like, we're still misunderstanding what a reviewer truly wants to see and what information really matters to them, and how much time we're spending on these like manual processes devised 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That don't add value to the review.
Yeah, I think about that all the time with the links, because you're like, all right, so we mentioned table 25 on this page 9 times. You could have the camp that says it's automated, it links everything, who cares, just let it link. There's the camp of just link the top one. There's the camp of don't link it at all. And all of us have, over the years, compiled all these anecdotal stories of the reviewer who has bad eyesight and keeps it at 500% zoomed in, and they need the link on every one because they're not seeing the whole page. Or the confusion when you look at the whole page and you're like, why is there so much blue text on here? I don't like to look at it. And the random like RTF because it wasn't navigable, because you didn't put bookmarks, and you're just like, okay, well, we got to do it all because I don't want to get rejected for any possible reason for any of these stories. And you just want, how do you, they put out a guidance. That was the best they could do, is they said it's a guidance. So when you have these internal struggles, you're just like, well, the guidance says it's strongly recommended to enable navigation, which is open to interpretation, right?
Which is written by the IT people at FDA who don't interact with the reviewers who are actually looking at the documents.
Right. And,
so you're just like living in a massive disconnect.
And it's funny because that is exactly a parallel. I just thought of this too, back in the paper days when we would put in like page intentionally left blank, or add an A or a B to the page number, and have to have the numbering a certain way in case they dropped the thing and it got scattered and they had to put it back together, as if that would happen ever anyway.
Yeah, and one of my favorite ones too is like the disconnect between an RTF or even just like a technical rejection. So like I was also at FDA at the time. I confess that we stood up the technical rejection process. And the point of that was just to ensure that people were submitting like vaguely, largely in the right format.
Yeah.
Before we got any further. We live, our customers, my customers, they live in fear of this rejection.
Oh, yeah.
At FDA, it's a blip. The reviewers don't even know it happens.
Right.
The IT people are barely paying attention. It's so automated. The whole purpose of the thing was to automate it. They don't, like, it's not a ding. No one knows. It's just like, make sure you submit the right files, and they're only checking like 4 things.
But press releases hinge on getting that second acknowledgement, and then the press release goes out and immediately your stock drops a few dollars every time.
Right. Which is like not something we understood when we were writing the technical rejection.
Yeah. It drops either way, by the way. Like, you're like, yay, submission. Why did the stock drop? And so it's a weird, you're so right, man. I hadn't thought of it that way. Like, even a few conversations with reviewers around how they review would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, if you know who your review team is and you have an RPM and you can just be like, hey, does your review team really like a lot of bookmarks, or do you not want it?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
how put that into a pre-meeting and they'll answer.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting. And I wonder how much of that too is well, I mean, I would say that's the case in a lot of these packages, these softwares, even in terms of, is the right audience in the conversation around the software package to begin with? Like,
and the software package, the software tooling, the analysis tooling is a major reason that some of those rules exist, right? It's not necessarily because reviewers want to look at a trial summary data set. It's because there are automated analyses that require information from specific data sets, and if it's not there, they can't do the automated analysis. And if they can't automate the analysis, they have to do it manually, and then they can't get to the filing date. Right? So that's what really drives a lot of what's in the guidance. It's more about how they're using the information in their software than it is about a reviewer reading a document.
I mean, like this, I had not thought about this before, but you are so dead on. I've never seen a reviewer, maybe it's happened, but I've never seen a reviewer at one of these meetings, these like big meetings, whether it's CIA annual or SIDM, any of these things where they are like, let me show you how I review the stuff you send us. Like, we follow the guidance, we send it, it gets validated, and we're done. You might hear like rumblings of like the reviewer didn't like this link or whatever. Like, that was many years ago when the ECD first came out. But since then, it's been nothing.
Yeah.
even ECTD 4.0, is that going to help them, or is that more of an operational side thing? So we can did anybody ask them?
No, for ECTD 4.0, no. I mean, that was just an obligatory adoption because we'd waited so long. It was again this like level of inevitability. But is that it enables automated process, right? So standards and standard submission formats enable FDA's automated process. That automation enables them to access the information that they need on the timeline that they have to do it in.
But did the review software package companies have sessions with the reviewers to create those tools, or were they created to just visually illustrate what XML does from an organizational standpoint?
Primarily the latter, and I would say it's not because typically I've also been a consultant in FDA. So as a consultant at FDA, it's actually very difficult to get reviewers to look at the software thing you're building for them.
Interesting.
Even when your intentions are really good and you really want them to. I mean, the one exception is I was able to get product managers from review teams when I was working at CTP, because CTP is structured a little bit differently and I had a champion. But at Cedar, it's incredibly difficult to get reviewers time when you're building new software. Even if, like, especially as a consultant, but even if you're, if you're led by someone who works there at FDA, it's just really difficult. They're entirely different organizational units. And so frequently those things, it's UAT for rollout is the first time a reviewer sees that, and they have a set of champions and they kind of look at it. And, 10 reviewers out of a population of 500 look at a thing and then it gets rolled out.
That must be incredibly frustrating for them.
I think it is frustrating. I think it's frustrating, like, for everyone, right? Because reviewers don't think it's a good use of their time to participate generally in the development of these software tools, but then they get something that they don't like.
Yeah.
And the people developing them really wish that they had better feedback. They can't really get it. And then they get, a lot of feedback at the wrong time.
It's pretty pervasive, even though these things have been around forever. Like, we run into this all the time. Like, I still have, to this day, people that don't know what's available to them in a RIM system. So, like, I'm saying that the FDA or the health authorities don't realize that we're doing it. What's worse is our own companies don't realize why we're doing it. They still think there's just some, like, administrative record-keeping archiving going on, and that's all it is. It's like, it is so much more powerful as a tool for just information management in general. Is so useful for long-term information.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with someone about, like, what does RegOps look like in the future, but I think it's super relevant to what does review look like in the future as well. Yeah. And it's a much more tech savvy person and a much less document and business process type person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's more about moving data and ensuring that data is in the right structure and the right format, and that if there's a change, that change is getting moved to the reviewer so that they can see what the change was. So I do see that our RegOps teams and our review teams are going to be sort of this, like, hybrid. You need to have regulatory expertise, or you need to have scientific expertise, but you also need to have, I don't love the phrase prompt engineer, but you will need to be a really good prompt engineer in order to get good answers.
Yeah.
And you will need to know how to weed out the noise from the signal. And you will need to understand how to receive data as a reviewer, and as a reg ops professional, you're going to need to understand how to send that data to them.
I think that coming out of this conversation, I really believe that we are missing a huge opportunity right now, given all the energy here, to bring a few distinct groups together that don't usually talk. Software, ops, reviewers, and strategists.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time trying to think about, like, where are these people, right? And there's in ICH, there's reviewers, there's health authorities, there's industry, but there's no technologists. We're like missing the third leg of the stool. And then we have HL7, and I love what HL7 does, but they're still kind of famous for being really tech savvy humans who go off into the world and develop something and then like have to come back and make it
Right.
work in real life, and it doesn't
Right.
always,
Yeah.
right? If we started thinking about those as groups of development teams that work together toward a
Yeah.
common vision, and this is the thing I think we're all landing on, but we really need is this like shared vision for what this future looks like, so that we can get the right people in the right room. But I also think there's a lot of groups that are sort of ripe for disruption, similar to the C-disk
Yeah.
disruption, you know?
Yeah. Wow. A lot of food for thought, I'd say. So anything you want to discuss around the future of your role, and I think what you've been tasked to do at a software vendor in life sciences is to think about these things, and I think that's amazing and very unique, but it needs to be more prevalent, I would say. So how are you feeling about that role and your ability to make headway?
Yeah. So when I started, I think the vision for my role was pretty different. But early, very early in my like first starting here, I looked at my boss and I said, "We're going to be talking about data a lot more than we are." And I was like coming out, I had worked for the chief data officer at FDA. I'm a data thinker. That's just the way my brain works. But I kind of was like, I don't think we're going to get away from this data thing.
Right. Right.
And over the course of the last year, there were some things that were very obvious, right? Like, interacting with health authorities, helping us navigate the world of health authorities, helping us be a little more proactive and less reactive, putting thought leadership out into the world, responding to requests for information as a thought leader, and doing a little bit more of that. But there's a much stronger data emphasis than I think any of us had really anticipated, because of the way that we're, EMA is moving toward this like digital data infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
And so the data heavy component is definitely a little bit different, but also my favorite thing. So it's working really well.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Finding your wheelhouse. Yeah.
It is. But I think what I've decided in the next, my focus for this year is to really try and be the one that helps develop what that vision for the next iteration is.
Yeah.
And share it with ICH and share it with HL7 and share it with CDISC and share it with FDA and share it with EMA and give it freely to the world and let them take it. But, I'm hearing people sort of repeat back some of the words that we're saying already.
Yeah.
Right. So if we can get these organizations working toward a common goal and define what that is, instead of thinking like we hit ECTD 4.0, we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have SDTM, we're done. We're not done.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little the last time we were together. Is this aspirational global standardization, if you want to call it, idea? I think there's not enough, or well, let's say it this way: there's a very small number of people that could probably have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I think you're among them. And maybe that is just the point, is like, if nobody's done it up to now, then we just have to try it and do it, because who else is going to do it? And we're also at this weird inflection point with AI where these hard-won lessons that we've learned over the last 30 years, we are going to be surrendering that knowledge to the robots, and then they'll be able to do with it what they will. So we got to put out as much of that knowledge, as possible, and to your point, share it freely. Like, there's no reason to hoard this information, really. It's not done us any good in its current silos, right?
No. And I think, as a software vendor, I try to think about like what is the way that my company makes money, and how do I not impede that? But how do I, as a member of a company that is a public benefit corporation, also contribute to the industry and sort of the
Right.
universe of this space,
Right.
drive it forward for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that it works for everyone better than it
Yeah.
currently does.
Yeah.
That's not IP, right? Like that's not my special software, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
the data standards should be freely available. I think the exchange platform, in order for health authorities to be able to use a data exchange platform, that in some cases may need to be freely available. There's a
Yeah.
lot out there that needs to just be developed by people in order to achieve interoperability in the
Yeah.
future. That stuff
Yeah.
has to be free.
Yeah.
And we have to work together to build it. I recently reached out to a colleague that I haven't talked to probably in something like 8 years. And I reached back out and I said, I know we both sort of retired from data standards because we got frustrated, but I'm going to need you to come out of retirement. Like, are you ready? I think it's time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The universe just turned around and looked at me and said, like, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And I think we need to start, helping people understand what's possible
Mm-hmm.
so that
Yeah.
we can build toward it.
I love that. That's a great place to wrap it, Crystal. I really appreciate your time to chat about this stuff. I think I've been joking with the other guests. Like this is a podcast for maybe 500 people tops.
That's a lot.
But that's a lot, and I think that these conversations will help get people together and bring some ideas together and move them from the bar at the hotel at the conference or the booth in the conference to maybe a broader scale. And I just love what you're doing with your work and your platform at this point, and whatever I can do to help pull that together or contribute to those types of efforts, whether it's writing stuff, talking about stuff, whatever the case may be. I'd really love to do that. I think this is a really good thing for patients, and I think it's great. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah. You can leave the FDA, but you never leave the public health mission behind.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Crystal. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Sure thing. Thank you so much.